Hello, Fiddle here. Today I'm going to be going over how I personally cleared the new event in Limbus, the 4th Walpurgis, what I did, and what you can do if you want to follow these steps. One thing to mention is this is in no way the most optimal or best team. This is just what I did personally, the first thing that came to my mind when working through and clearing the event when I cleared it live on stream. So, to start off with, of course, did normal mode first. My first team I brought into normal mode was what you're seeing on the screen right now. I brought the original two W Corp Dawn and W Corp Roshu. I can never pronounce her name. Also brought W Corp Alce, Multicrack Faust, and Heathcliff. That's the main combat team, the main 5, because for the event it's 5, and then for normal mode, it's just the original 5 group. For hard, it's a backup chain battle. The main idea behind this is I'm a big fan of Multicrack. It's one of my favorite IDs, so anytime there's a new event, I don't know what I'm going into. I always go into these blind without knowing the resistances. I bring the IDs I like. I bring things I think were fun. The concept is, of course, charge tribal. The reason I bring Faust is I like Faust, Dawn, and Roshu are all the main damage dealers of the group, with Alce being a support unit, of course, for W Corp. She's going to increase the damage of these first 3, and the main reason I bring Rabbit is not necessarily for how strong it is, which it is very, very strong for ID. I'm mostly bringing it because this team's lacking Wrath and Gluttony, and those are really nice to have, especially Wrath with the comp I'm running. The egos I ran were Temple, because if you're running Faust, I think you run Temple. Fluid Sex is good, but she gets a unbelievable amount from Temple, and she's one of the few IDs that does, and she can just smack. That's the main one required. I always bring Hex now. Like, if I'm missing a slot, I always bring it. It's not required. Don't worry about Hex now. With Dawn, the main ones that were required for her that I brought is, again, Temple. I bring Electric Screaming because it just works. It's charge. There's a easy MV resonance, but this is not at all required. With her, honestly, none of these egos are really required. I bring Soda for fun. We're Soda gamers here. And if you had to bring one, if you're like Fiddle, I really want to bring one. What's my recommendation? Blind Obsession, because it synergizes with the charge. With Heathcliff, again, Heathcliff's egos don't really matter, but I would bring the 2 charge ones because he's a charge ID. He also lacks consumers, and these provide charge consumption, although you may not want to use consumption because it gets benefits from holding charge. And then with Alce, her egos, they didn't really matter either, but if you had to pick one, again, this is a charge team, might as well bring Dimension Shredder. As far as support passives go, where this is Buff Faust, and Alce gets a little bit buffs here, so I brought a bunch of blunt buffs aiming to hit her, buff her, so she can do big damage. We bring South Section 6 Lou. The reason why you bring him is his passive buffs 4 hits, and of course we got 2 4 hits. They're also the lowest speeds on the team to help differentiate the speed difference too. Where we bring Mersault, which will help address the speed issue, because the highest charge should be normally Faust. She's a roller coaster of emotion. It's either going to be Faust or Heathcliff, mostly because Heathcliff's not going to be consuming charge, so we're going to whiff these 2, and they're already pretty slow, like they're 3 to 6, so they're most likely going to get buffed by him. We're going to bring this guy, help differentiate who gets the buff a little bit. It buffs the lowest speed by 2 at +5 charge count. So it's going to base... The idea is we're trying to guarantee that one of the big hitters here gets it. We don't really care who gets it. A little bit Sandy, healing with Sing. And yeah, that's what I brought in originally. This team definitely can be refined. I'm not so sure. Like, I would probably, if I had to come up with a solution on how to refine it, maybe you drop Heathcliff, you go for the multi-crack, aim the buff Faust, and then bring some more blunt so you're able to line up the blunt better. This worked for normal. It beat the 7 turns. The next team, though, I had to change this up for completing the new, the hard mode. For the hard mode, I used this team. Let me close that so you can clearly see it. The main thing with hard mode is the main 2 missions that are going to be the hardest to complete is the 12 turn and the no deaths mission. The main reason those are difficult is because of the final boss. The final boss is the obelisk from Lobotomy Corp, and it is a tanky boy. It gains protections from its defensive ability, and it always uses 1 to 2 defensive abilities per turn. And the other thing it does is after, I believe, 4 turns in its sort of rotational cycle, it does a AoE that if it hits the targets, it does 100 HP damage on hit. It's basically a one-shot. If it's not a one-shot, it's a stagger to oblivion that leads to a one-shot. Because it normally follows that up with another AoE that's difficult, and you're probably not going to be able to clash it unless you have like 2 people surviving. Since it is a chain battle, death is not the end of the world, but you really don't want things to die. So this entire team was around the idea it's going to be a tight timing. The main thing that's replaceable is the Mersault. The Mersault's sort of a lingering thought here. He was originally main team. He ended up getting dropped main team. So this is the one thing I personally would change. The main group we're bringing is in slot 1 where I brought Red Eyes because Red Eyes does lust and blunt damage, which is really, really good. The first 3 waves are just the normal blobs, and they're weak to both lust and sloth. They take even more sloth damage, and they're weak to both pierce and blunt. And the final boss is similar. So Red Eyes, her skill 3, where she's going to do the most damage, is going to be blunt lust, which is really good. And then we bring Sing because Sing helps fulfill our other quest of putting dots on the target. You have a certain amount of different stats effects you want to put. Ring falls perfectly in that. He's also a bleed, which works here very well. If we're bringing Ring, of course, we're going to bring Faust. Faust also has typings that match quite nicely. I brought Heathcliff. Heathcliff honestly can kind of be replaceable. He's just a pretty strong ID, especially if we're bringing Captain. I brought Captain because she has that nice bleed base execute. She's also all piercing, which is really good here. When you look at the support IDs, of course, we're piercing, so I'm bringing Dawn to support. I'm bringing Ring to support because we have the other Ring. It works quite nice. 2 other bleed, lust base. We're going to be building up a lot of lust. Lust is very easy for us to accumulate, and it's very easy to hold because our egos don't consume lust like crazy. So it's just, it's nice support passives because when you're using egos, you're not using lust. So you're always going to be holding enough resources to benefit from the passives. The last one, that I brought for support is Blade Lineage. I brought Blade Lineage because it was the best of the worst options. We can kind of get a resonance sometimes, but he doesn't really have good egos here because his other option is like we would bring this, but it's also on a pride resonance, which is kind of awkward for us to pull off. These things don't really have sanity, so we can't really use the damage buff here. We're not running burn. We do have blunt, so if I had to pick one, I would probably pick the one who grips. The main reason I wasn't running him is that, as you can see, we don't really generate wrath like ever. So it's awkward. I also didn't bring him because the original comp I brought was charge, and we're going to be using wrath for temples, so there could be an argument to use it. I mean, if we're not benefiting from this passive at all, I would just bring it for if you eventually build up Wrath. The last thing I brought, which is very interesting, I don't see many people bringing this, is Assistant Manager. And her support passive says you do 20% more against enemies that use defensive skills this turn. This is really good for this boss because every turn it uses a defensive that increases its protection by 2. It either uses 1 or 2 of that defensive. And so the main tactic against the final boss here is either you're gonna like stack a bunch of debuffs and shred it through like things like burn, or kill it through like rupture, or you need to kill it through some external motive. If you're not bringing a heavy debuff or heavy drain sort of thing, I don't know how to say this, like dot class or status effect IDs, and you want to like try to bring just a straight damage, then you have to be more careful with your timing. You gotta make sure that your last IDs are the ones clashing with their defensive. The main reason you want to do this is you want the defensive being the last thing to go off because it's what applies the protection. So you want to make sure your slowest characters are probably your weaker ones. That way they're the ones who are most likely to clash with the protection, while your other 4, or I say other 4, your other IDs, which are your faster ones, are going to be doing the damage. They're going to be doing the clashing without worrying about like their damage being reduced from the protections. Try the clash with the defensive shield last. And that was my general tactic. Another, again, ring completes a lot of quests. Bleed is definitely favored. I wouldn't bring Blade Lineage or Charge because it's not weak to slashing, it's neutral, but it definitely benefits to bring more piercing and blunt IDs to these. I would kind of avoid Envy because the final boss is resistant to Envy. I mean, it's Violet Noon, and thematically it makes sense that it would resist Envy. And that doesn't, if we look back at our Bleed team, that doesn't really hurt the new ID. Another benefit to bringing Red Eyes is that before the last boss, there's a vent check, and I forget what the 2 Sin archetypes are. I'll probably put it on the screen. But one of them is a Envy check, and she comes with an Envy skill, and then on top of that, the Lobotomy Egos IDs get a +5 buff on the coin flip. So they help pass that event check before the final boss. That event check is what puts the red shield on your character, and I believe if your characters don't have that shield from that event, they'll just get one shot. You can't complete the quest without passing that event. So make sure you bring either a Lobotomy Ego ID, or you bring something with a high lust, so you can, not lust, sorry, envy, to pass that. And that's my general guide on how to play it. With the, another thing to mention with the turns is you need to complete, for hard mode, you need to complete it within 12 turns. So you need to normally kill the blobs within 2 to 3 turns. You need, there's 3 waves of the blobs. One of them you can spend 3 turns on like one of them and then 2 turns on the rest. Your goal is to try to aim for 7. You don't want to take longer than 7 turns on the first 3 waves, because if you do, the last boss is just a beefcake, and you need time to deal with that. So in my experience from doing the event, it takes about 4 turns, and again, you want to try to either stagger him or kill him within 4 turns so he doesn't do the on hit, and maybe 4 to 3. He definitely needs to be staggered somewhere near that turn range, but because of how low his stagger threshold is, when you do stagger him, you should just kill him after that. I mean, of course, like, when he gets staggered, he's not going to do protection anymore because it's stagger on the body, I want to specify. Staggering the body parts doesn't stop that super hit, but staggering the body does. And when you stagger the body, it's probably dead after that turn. But your goal is to try to get that try to get that body staggered before that turn 3 or that turn 4. So yeah, that's my general strategy. If you would like to see me play the game more, if you want to like come see me stream, or if you want to come like leave a comment that I will guarantee read. Of course, comment on the YouTube channel, I'll read. Leaving a like always helps. It's always nice. So yeah, I stream live on Twitch every Wednesday through Friday, 5 to 9 p.m. Central. Make sure to drop on by. Make sure to leave a comment, and yeah, I'll see you next time.